Let's go ahead and bring in Elizabeth Carter to talk about Brexit and its impact. She's an assistant professor of political science at the University of New Hampshire. She's joining us live from Toronto. Professor Carter, thank you for joining us. Where do you think this process is heading? It seems like a no deal might actually be gaining some steam.
I agree with you. A no deal is becoming more likely by the day. Right now, it looks like Theresa May is going to put this to a vote sometime during the week of the 14th of January. And basically, if this doesn't pass, there is not enough time to have an alternative deal before the 29th of March. So actually, Jeremy Corbyn has been saying he thinks that she's trying to have the vote at the time that she does to push people who otherwise wouldn't support the vote, to kind of push them to support it to avoid a no deal. And I think at this point, she doesn't have the vote she needs. She will only get it if people are, again, forced to vote for it to avoid the no deal. Right now, people are still unhappy about the backstop. They don't want Britain having to be subject to the European Union having to sign off on them leaving the customs union. So right now, a no deal is definitely a possibility, and it's going to be, are people going to feel pressured enough to vote for a plan that they really don't like? That's the question. That
backstop you mentioned, of course, is Ireland, Northern Ireland. Is that really what is holding up a deal between the UK and the continent?
This has been the biggest sticking point for both sides, because neither side wants there to be a hard border. But the question is, how do you have two separate custom unions in Ireland without a border? Right? So that's why the EU is staying a part of the customs union, but subject to the EU's regulations. But now they're regulations that Britain doesn't have a voice in. So the people that voted for Brexit are saying, we're worse off. We're still subject to Brussels, but we didn't gain anything, and in fact, we've lost something. So nobody likes the plan, but it's not apparent what could arise in the place in such a short term.
Which side do you think has the most to lose, the UK or Brussels?
Definitely the UK, for sure. If you're looking at the British magazines today, they will say something different. They'll say, oh, the European Union is going to lose our 39 billion pound divorce settlement, and it's true that trade will be very disrupted for the Europeans. But here's Britain that's losing the custom union that it's in, and the trade with 27 partners, where Europe is losing trade with a very important player, but just one. So Britain, European Union has already started making no-deal plans. So they have plans that are already in place for the movement of trucks, airplanes, for finance, and they have said Britain will not be able to, the British banks will not be able to be subject to our financial passport regulation that enables them to bank easily in the European Union. So the banks are going to have to change something. And Britain has been trying to make plans, but they don't have anything in place that they've announced. Right? It seems there's a lot of uncertainty, and it makes markets very uncomfortable. It makes the Brits living abroad and vice versa uncomfortable. Massive amounts of uncertainty, a very small window, and this is a bit of a disaster at this point.
Those markets uncomfortable that you mentioned, I want to talk about the city, London's financial sector. How much is at stake for that industry?
Whoops, one moment, I just lost my my earpiece.
All right, well, I'll re-ask.
But I heard your question.
Oh, okay, you can go ahead and keep talking.
How much is at stake? So I think the most important thing, as I was saying earlier, the markets really dislike uncertainty, and we're going to be seeing a very weak pound. I have some feedback. We're going to be seeing a very weak pound, and that's really going to be hurting the city, and it's going to be hurting the British investments in foreign markets. And we also, as I said, there's going to be some changes going on with the banking regulations in the European Union. So it's instability, weak pound all around. It's going to be a disaster for finance and for the city. I can't imagine there's any person working in the city that is a supporter of Brexit. That's hard for me to wrap my mind around. Maybe in the long run the city could rebound, but we don't know. It also could be that we see maybe Frankfurt kind of stepping into that role as the euro.
I wanted to ask you actually briefly, if we can, we've got about 30 seconds left, but what are some of the unintended consequences, perhaps unmentioned or unknown consequences to consumers globally because of this impending breakup?
I think the most important one is going to be about One, the changes to currencies, weaker pound, weaker euro, and that's going to affect the balance of trade. And also, Britain will be able, if they have no deal or if they have something that passes, they'll be able to renegotiate bilateral trade agreements for each individual country. We don't know what those will look like yet, but that could mean different trade relationships that are coming to emerge. We have different currencies, different trade relationship, and for the most part, the currencies will mean the pound will be weaker, so the Brits will be buying fewer Chinese goods, fewer U.S. goods, and we'll be buying more of their products.
Elizabeth Carter from the University of New Hampshire, thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks for having me.